All right, let's take a look at a couple of labor-saving devices inside of the .NET framework, and these are known as common dialog boxes. So we'll go into Visual Studio, and we have a demo here, a demo of common dialog boxes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a quick menu strip on this application, and in that menu strip, I'm going to add a file menu, and underneath file, I'm going to add an open and a save. These are two very common menu items, of course. So let's go ahead and add an event procedure to open. So that opens up our stub like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an object called the open file dialog. So OFD, and I'll just create an object, instantiate an object of class open file dialog, like so. And I'm going to call a method from that object known as show dialog. Okay? So the show dialog method takes either no parameters or one parameter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that second version that takes the owner of this dialog. So in this case, the owner of this dialog is specified by the this keyword because I want this form to be connected with that form or that show dialog from the open file dialog class. Now what this returns is, as you can see, something called dialog result. And if we go into the object browser, we can see under System Windows Forms that dialog result right here is actually yet another enumeration with the values abort, cancel, or with the numerals, abort, cancel, ignore, no, none, okay, retry, and yes. In other words, these are the buttons that could be clicked upon as a result of showing a dialog. So it's another example of an enumeration, and we will take advantage of that by using those numeral names in our code. So going back to the code, that's the result of calling show dialog. So I want to compare this against one of those enumerals. So it would be dialog result, and in this case, I want to compare it against OK. So in other words, if as a result of calling show dialog, I get back a dialog result OK, that means that there is some data inside of that object that I should be looking at. And specifically, it's the file name chosen by the user. So I'm going to say if OFD show dialog this is equal to or yields result, then I'm going to have some file IO code to open the specified file. Now we're not going to do that here because we will talk about file IO in a separate video, but that's what would go there. So for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply display that message using a message box shell. And what I'm looking for is OFD. Of course, that's the file open dialog object dot file name, like so. And so, of course, in normal flow of control, you would expect you to, again, take the OFD file name information and use that to open the appropriate file. All right, so let's see what that gets us. And there's my application, and I say File, and then click Open. And as you can see, exactly what we want, very easily, we get an instance of the standard open file dialog window. And I can select, for example, program.cs. And when I click Open, that's the same as OK. And there you see the file as specified by the user. In other words, the user effectively picked that file, and now it's available to you in your Windows code. And I'm going to go ahead and close out of that application and go back to design and double click on save. That yields for me a stub for the save menu item. And it's the same basic code. So just as before, I created an open file dialog object. Here I'm going to create a save file dialog object, SFD, and set that equal to new save file dialog. And just as before, I'm going to take the object and call its method show dialog. with an owner of the current form. And again, if the user selects dialog result OK, which is to say if they click on the OK button, or what is effectively the same as the OK button. As we saw before with open, it's the same as open, and with save, it'll be the same as save. And then, of course, we would have file IO code to save as specified file. And in this case, again, I'm not going to put that code here. We will talk about file IO later in a different video, but I do want to note or display that we do have an SFD file name that we get as a result of attempting to save the file. All right, so I click Run. Here's my application. I click Save. And just as we saw before, with Open File Dialog, with Save File Dialog, you get the same basic idea. It's the standard save or save as dialog box, and it's just a matter of, again, the user typing in the file there, and you can specify types and things like that. And you'll notice that because this is part of the standard file dialog, if I put a name that already exists, even though I'm not actually saving anything with file IO, I do get to confirm. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And the file that I get back is what I specified when I ran the program. And of course, if I had specified another name, then I wouldn't have gotten that confirm file replace. But as it is, I'm not actually doing any of that code. I'm simply displaying the name that was placed in the dialog box. So that's how we can use common dialog boxes to both standardize our code and make the code easier to write.